when I was involved in the helping of the design of this Z-Pack that we got in here, I found out something that is so simple to overlook. And also, as a for instance, I used to build transmissions in the shop, so I know about checking clearances, right? You check them with a feeler gauge, or you just kind of move them up and down.
Yeah, that's
a lot of the old time builders, that was their feeler gauge, right? You know, nowadays it's kind of difficult to get away with that because you can be so far off. Well, I was setting the clearance on these after we got our design parameters, and I looked up the specification, and it says right there in the Chrysler book, 30 to 63 thousandths. Okay. Well, instead of putting a feeler gauge up under there, I put this dial indicator on there, and I just move them up and down. What was that, about 31, 30?
You got about 36.
Yeah, it depends on how much I pull up on it, right?
How much Wheaties you had this morning?
Yeah, that too, yeah, right? So I figure I'm good. But I'm in spec, but now sometimes with manufacturing, tolerances and stuff like that, those frictions can, be a little bit thicker, and if they do, that reduces the clearance in there. So I had this originally changed as far as the thickness of this backing plate to add a little more clearance in there to make up for that difference in the manufacturing process. I send it out, and the guy tells me I got way too much clearance in there.
How does he know that through the scan?
Well, no, because if you look at this, I tried to get it a little bit more towards the center, and it actually ended up being a little bit closer to the other end of that spectrum.
So,
but I'm still in spec, and I'm still not afraid that if they come up a little bit thicker than what they're supposed to, or on the higher end of the spec, that I'm not going to run into it's too tight. That was my main concern. I didn't want it too tight. So he told me I had 90 thousandths clearance. I did not measure 90 thousandths clearance.
That's huge.
And I thought maybe he assembled it wrong. Maybe he left a plate out.
Yeah, that's what
All right. So he said no. So I said to myself, let me grab up another one of these, and I put it back into the drum, and I'm going to check it again just to make sure that I didn't do anything wrong. And when I did, I still came up with the same clearance. So after a little bit of thought, I said, let me go to the book. Sometimes when you go to the book, you find things. I looked at this picture, and that dial indicator is on the applied plate.
Yeah, not on the
spline. So I said, okay, let me move this up to the applied plate. Make sure that's more or less straight. I zero my indicator, but now I can't pull this backing plate up, and I can't push it down. It does say to use 20 psi of air, though, to apply that. I'm still pretty doubtful at that point in time, but I've got 20 psi of air here, and I air checked this drum.
You have 60. Hold on here.
Well, remember, it's going backwards. It should be around 50.
Right, it's going the other way.
Some guys have told me 49. Some guys have told me 51, 52.
Wow, that's 45 on your gauge, so that would be.
I might have been leaking a little more air than what it should have been. Let's see there.
That's on the pull down.
Okay, actually that is, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. That's about 55. It depends.
That's a fancy indicator, because that's swinging down the other way, too.
Well, yeah, see, I've got it loaded so that when I push down on there, it reads it up, and then I zero it out.
Mine must be old, so I don't think it knows that. I don't think it will.
Well, most of them will. Yeah, most of them will go both ways, because, if you push it down, enough, and then you lock it in place, then when you dial it back to zero, and it'll either go up more or it'll go down, depending on the movement.
How much?
So that explains to me why I had 90 thousandths clearance when I had set it at about 50, 55 to begin with. by moving it up and down this way, though, not by checking it with the dial indicator.
What do you think is the problem? But haven't you obviously
I
did
have-
it the other way a million
You know,
times?
my curiosity has made me look at this very closely. I thought maybe the backing plate between the underdrive and the overdrive clutch, where it locks into this part of the drum, I thought maybe that was moving a little bit. Now it's tight in there because you got snap ring on both sides. It's wedged in there. It's not going to move on its own. But I thought maybe it was pulling this down. So I put my dial indicator on this. I put the air to it. It didn't budge at all. There's a wavy snap ring under here, but that's not compressing that snap ring because this snap ring is actually pulling it down because of the way it's mounted in the drum. So I still don't have an explanation for it.
I'm just going to say, what's the answer?
Yeah,
we don't know yet.
And
what's the right way or wrong way?
someday I am probably going to tear this thing apart and try to study that a little more when I have nothing better to do. You know. But this just gets back to, you know, if you do it the right way to begin with, then you don't really have to worry about whether it's right or wrong.
When I know that it's the way you did it in the beginning, I would not try to pull down. That seems to be more piston travel forcing it down than actual clutch clearance clamping it down.
Now, there was one concern that I was thinking about. Well, they say 20 psi. Well, what if I run that up higher, like shot air, you know, because, and I've actually had somebody check it at 20, and I had him, and then he checked it at about 140, and he said the clearance was, or the movement was still the same. It didn't affect it. So it's not because the friction material is compressing or anything like that.